Shabbos Daf Vav opens with a discussion of what happens when somebody carries an object from a Rishus HaYachid through a Carmelist and sets it down in a Rishus HaRabim. Does that count as carrying the Eraisa or not? The Gemara will try to prove from three different cases that it does. The Gemara will explain the machlokas on the issue, and then the Gemara quotes the Brisa. The Brisa will finally define for us clearly what the four different zones in Hilchos Shabbos carrying are, and the Brisa will give us their halachos. Then the Gemara is going to work through the Brisa step by step and try to understand the language that the Brisa uses to explain each one, what is included, what is excluded, and some other details about the Brisa. So let's begin. We start the daf with the end of the daf before. On the bottom of daf Hey, we have a Brisa which says the following thing. Somebody has an object in a store, and he carries it through an area called the Stav into the Paltia. Now, what are these areas? We have to understand the layout of the land. In the days of Chazal, there was one central town square where everybody used to gather. There were stores surrounding the square. So the stores are Rishus HaYachid, the square is Rishus HaRabim. It's a very public area. And between the stores and the town square, there were seating areas, like benches, where people used to gather and hawk their wares in the street. You couldn't have the Rabim, the multitudes, walking through those areas. There were these stone seats all along the way. So that counts as a Carmelist. It's not a Rishus HaYachid because it's not fenced in. As we'll see, it's not a Rishus HaRabim because people don't walk there in large numbers. So here you have somebody who carried an object out of the store, which is Rishus HaYachid, through the Carmelist, which is the seating area, into the town square, which is the Rishus HaRabim. So the Gemara wants to know, the Brisa wants to know, what is the halacha in a case like that? And Tzemach Because Banazai says you are not chayev d'oraisa, even though you took it from Rishus HaYachid to Rishus HaRabim. Since you passed to a Carmelist along the way, you're not violating Nesed d'oraisa. However, the Chachamim say you do violate Nesed d'oraisa. Now the Gemara wants to know what the reason is. So Banazai, the Gemara says, I understand. When he's walking through the Carmelist, we view it as if he stopped there. Lumdishly, it's considered as if he froze. We have a freeze frame there. And therefore, I view it as if he put the object down in the Carmelist, and therefore he only transferred from Rishus HaYachid to a Carmelist, and then he picked it up again and transferred from the Carmelist to Rishus HaRabim. As we know, from a Carmelist to any other Rishus or vice versa is not an Isser d'oraisa. Therefore, he didn't violate any Isser d'oraisa. However, the Gemara says, let's understand the Rabbanan. The Rabbanan apparently seem to say that traveling from Rishus HaYachid with an object to Rishus HaRabim, passing through a Carmelist or not, makes no difference. The Gemara says, how do you know? Maybe the Isser d'oraisa is only if you're carrying directly from Rishus HaYachid into Rishus HaRabim or vice versa. How do you know that if you're passing through a Carmelist in between that it's not a problem? Who said that the Torah answered that situation as well? So the Gemara tries to bring three different proofs of situations where you're lifting an object from one area, putting it down in a different area which is clearly an Isser, but along the way you passed an area that is not included in the Isser. So what happens then? So the Gemara first says, anytime you carry an object from somewhere to somewhere and you move further than you have to, right? You lift up an object in Rishus HaRabim. The halach is if you carry 4 amas in Rishus HaRabim and you put it down, that's an Isser d'oraisa. Moving an object 4 amas within Rishus HaRabim is also an Isser d'oraisa. So the Gemara says, let's say you moved 5 amas. So the last amma you moved is not mechayev you anything. That space is not an Isser. Because once you crossed 4 amas, if you would put it down there, it's already Isser. What you move it further is not an Isser. So that, then when you put the object down after passing the 5th amma, you're still chayev d'oraisa. So you see, the fact that you passed through a space where there was no Isser for you to walk along the way doesn't mean that you're not chayev when you ultimately put it down. The same thing should apply if you pass to a Carmelist on your way to the Rishus HaRabim. There's no reason why the passing the Carmelist should be any worse than the extra amma you walked. Both of them are not a place where you would be chayev. The Gemara says, how could you compare the two? If he would put the object down anywhere in that extra amma, he'd be chayev for it. The only reason you're not chayev is because he didn't put it down. But it's not like a Carmelist where if he would put it down, he wouldn't be chayev for it. That is a zone of non-chayev. The extra amma is not a zone of non-chayev. He's not a chayev for it because he was already chayev before. So the Gemara says, okay, I'll give you a different answer. When he's carrying an object 4 amas in Rishus HaRabim, were he to put it down within the 4 amas, he would have carried it less than 4 amas, and therefore he would not be chayev d'oraisa. He would not violate the Isser d'oraisa. So that zone of within 4 amas is obviously not a place where it's carrying the d'oraisa. Yet at the end of 4 amas, it is carrying the d'oraisa. It's the same situation. From where he picks it up until the 4th amma, he's passing through a place where he wouldn't be chayev if he put it down there. So a Carmelist is the same thing. It's a zone where he wouldn't be chayev if he would put it down in the Carmelis, and therefore, just like the 4 amas in between is not a reason why you shouldn't be chayiv when you put it down after 4 amas, the Carmelis in between is not a reason you shouldn't be chayiv when you put it down afterwards in the Rishos Rabbim. The Gemara says again, that's not a comparison. Those 4 amas is a place, it's a zone where he would be chayiv. It's just not far enough. That's an issue for him, for his carrying. But the zone qualifies as a zone where he would be chayiv daraisa. How can you compare that to a Carmelis where the entire zone is one that nobody could be chayiv deraisa for putting anything down there? That's not a comparison at all. Okay, so the Gemara says, I'll give you a third example. Let's say somebody is carrying an object from a Rishos Rabbim to a Rishos Yachid, or a Rishos Yachid to a Rishos Rabbim. Along the way, he passes an area called Tzidei Rishos Rabbim, the sides of a Rishos Rabbim. That's the side of the main street where people don't generally walk. People usually walk in the middle of the street. Up near the fences on the side of the street, nobody walks there, and therefore that's a Carmelis. Yet, if you carry something across that zone, you're still chayiv when you ultimately put it down in the other Rishos. So you clearly see that when you carry from Rishos Yachid, let's say a house, across the Tzidei Rishos Rabbim, which is a Carmelis, out into Rishos Yachid, that you are still chayiv. So passing through a Carmelis is not a reason not to be chayiv. Okay, the Gemara says, I hear that. That's very good, but that's only according to the Rabbanan, because we have a machlokes where the Rabbanan say, what is the halacha of Tzidei Rishos Rabbim? The Rabbanan say it counts as a Carmelis, it's not a Rishos Rabbim, and therefore your proof works. But the Shita of Rabbi Elazar, who holds that the Tzidei Rishos Rabbim count as Rishos Rabbim themselves. And therefore, when the person carried from Rishos Yachid through Tzidei Rishos Rabbim to Rishos Rabbim, he never passed a Carmelis. It was Rishos Rabbim the whole way. The Tzidei Rishos Rabbim counts as Rishos Rabbim. So what are you going to say? So the Gemara says, no, Rabbi Elazar only said that in a situation where there were no pegs along the way of the Tzidei Rishos Rabbim. If you had pegs along the way to keep traffic out, to keep them out of that area, out of the Tzidei Rishos Rabbim, then Rabbi Elazar agrees that it doesn't count as a Rishos Rabbim, it counts as a Carmelis, and that's the case where we have a proof from. Now the Gemara adds a statement here. Rav Yochanan says, Ben Azai, who holds that you are not chayav deraisa, you did not violate an iser deraisa when you crossed from Rishos Yachid through the seating area to the Rishos Rabbim, to the town square. He only says that if you actually carry the object through. If you threw it across, you are chayiv, because it's considered like it went directly from Rishos Yachid to Rishos Rabbim. That it flew through a Carmelis is not a reason to make it not an iser deraisa. The flying through the Carmelis is not considered like it rested there. Now we begin the brisa, which defines for us finally and clearly what the 4 rishiyos, the 4 zones of carrying on Shabbos are. So first the brisa says as follows: Rishos Yachid, a private domain, is as follows. It is not defined by whether it is privately owned or not. It's defined by its shape. A private domain, Rishos Yachid, is a zone which is a space that is 4 amas by 4 amas wide, minimum, and it is surrounded by walls that either extend upwards from the surface or downwards, no less than 10 tefachim. The brisa gives 2 examples. You could have a ditch or trench which is 10 tefachim deep, and it is 4 amas wide, and therefore it counts because it has walls surrounding it. Or you could have a wall, a high stone wall, which is 10 tefachim tall, and the wall itself is at least 4 amas wide. That counts as a surface with walls extending downward, so therefore it counts as a Rishos Yachid. Next, what's a Rishos Rabbim? That is defined by the fact that it has a lot of people passing through there. An area with a large number of people using it counts as a Rishos Rabbim. Here, the Brisa again gives examples, this time 3. It could be a highway that moves from city to city. It could be a main town square, like we saw in the previous Gemara. Or it could be a street, which is a through street. It goes entirely through the neighborhood or through the area or from town square to town square. People who just use the street to pass through. Those 3 all count as Rishos Rabbim because there are large crowds of people that pass through there. Now, what is the halacha of this Rishos Rabbim and Rishos Hayachid? Somebody who carries an object from one to the other, if he does it b'shegeg, by mistake, he doesn't realize that it's aser, he has to bring a carbon chatos. If he does it on purpose and there were witnesses, he gets skila, stoning, and if there aren't witnesses, then he gets kares. Now, the next zone is a Carmelis. A Carmelis is any area that doesn't fit neatly into one of those 2 categories. It's not filled with big crowds of people, but it is not fenced in. Doesn't have walls surrounding it going up or down. Here we have examples. Fields, a valley, the area in front of stores, not fenced in area where people hawk their wares, or the Brisa says a Carmelis. And the Gemara will ask, Carmelis, how could that be an example of a Carmelis? Okay, what's the halacha of these? It's not Rosh Hashanah, it's not a Rosh Hashanah, it is in between. You may not carry an object within it a distance of 4 amas. You may not transfer from it to Rosh Hashanah or Rosh Hashanah or vice versa. If you do any of these things, you violate an Issa D'Rabbanan, not the Raisa. Now the Gemara brings examples of scenarios where you're transferring an object from a Rosh Hashanah to another Rosh Hashanah and it's forbidden. And those are as follows. If you have fenced-in areas like a yard, from a yard to a house, or from a house to a yard, or a cul-de-sac to a yard. Now, in the days of Chazal, houses were set up with houses built around a common courtyard. In order to get out of the area, you would have to go out of your house into the yard, and out of the yard into the cul-de-sac, which was the street, which was not open all the way. It ended in the yard, but the street would take you on the other end to the main street. So the yard, the house, and the cul-de-sac itself are all considered Rishos HaYachid. Gemara will explain exactly why. And if you carry from one to the other without what's called an Erev Chatzeris, which makes them all communally owned by one fund that belongs to all the members that own land in the area, so if you don't have that, that is also an Isser D'Rabbanan. In order to be able to legally carry from one Rosh Hashanah to another, you have to have an Erev Chatzeris. We will learn about those halachas later. Now the Brisa talks about a Makayim Patur, and that is defined as, although it's not explicit here in the Brisa, it's defined as an area which is less than 4 amas by 4 amas, but is 10 tvachim high. It doesn't count as its own rishus because it's too small. So what is its halakha? It takes on the status of whatever rishus it's in. If it is in Rishus Harabim, it's Rishus Harabim. If it's in Rishus Yachid, it's a Rishus Harabim. Therefore, it's not forbidden to carry from the area that it is in into it itself. Now, the Gemara has a case of a stoop, which is kind of like a threshold, a raised area at the door of a home. So it's a makam p'tur because it's less than 4 amas wide, and it is 10 tfachim high, but it is bordering between Rosh Hashanah, the house, and Rosh Hashanah. So what is that halacha? So there is a machlokes. The first sheet says as follows: you can carry from it to either zone and back because it is a makam p'tur. It does not have any specific halacha of its own that forbids it. So you can carry from the scoop to Rosh Hashanah or from the stoop to the Rosh Hashanah. However, you cannot take an object from somebody in one zone and pass it to somebody in the other zone. That's forbidden because that is too close to actually passing it from Rosh Hashanah to Rosh Hashanah, and therefore we forbid that because it's going to lead to problems down the road. Next, the other opinion is as follows: it doesn't have a neutral status, it has a status of whichever it's closer to. So if the door is open, then the stoop counts as part of the house, as part of Rosh Hashanah. If the door is closed, then it counts as part of Rosh Hashanah, and it gets the halacha of Rosh Hashanah. The Brisa ends, if the stoop is 4 amas wide, then it counts as its own Rishus. The Gemara will ask, of course, that's the same as the case of the wall that was 4 amas wide. Why should it be different? Now the Gemara begins to analyze each of the halachas which we saw in the Brisa. First of all, the Gemara observes that when the Brisa describes a Rosh Hashanah as having 4 walls, it says Zuhi Rosh Hashanah. This is the Rosh Hashanah. That kind of language implies that there's some other kind of Rosh Hashanah that you may have thought is a Rosh Hashanah, and our Brisa is coming to tell you that it's not. The Gemara wants to know what's that. The Gemara says that's Rav Yehuda's opinion. Rav Yehuda holds that even if you have only 2 walls around the Rosh Hashanah, those 2 walls make it into Rosh Hashanah. All you need is 2 walls to make it into a Rosh Hashanah. You do need something else. You have to be concerned that those 2 walls, if they're facing each other, if they're across from each other, and people just walk right between them, they're not even going to notice that it's a Rosh Hashanah. So you have to make some kind of a sign, some kind of a marker, and therefore you have to put a pole on the 2 corners of the walls, on 2 of the corners of the walls, or you have to put a beam that goes across the top from wall to wall. One of these things you have to do, but other than that, it qualifies as a full-fledged Rosh Hashanah according to as a full-fledged Rosh Hashanah Midairaisa. The Gemara says that's Rabbi Yehuda's opinion, but our Brisa is coming to tell you we don't hold that way. The Rabbanan disagree. The Rabbanan say no, you cannot make a Rosh Hashanah just by adding poles or beams when you have 2 walls. You got to have 4 walls. So now the Gemara asks, okay, but then the Brisa says that when there's 4 walls, that's a Rosh Hashanah Gemura. That's a complete Rosh Hashanah. What's that for? Why do you say this is a complete Rosh Hashanah? So the Gemara explains, because we want you to realize that the 2-wall Rosh Hashanah, not only is it not a Rosh Hashanah to allow you to carry within it, it's not even a Rosh Hashanah to say that you have to be machmir, go l'chumra, and that you would be forbidden to carry something from Rosh Hashanah into that. And you should consider Rosh Hashanah l'chumra not to carry into it. It's not even that. It's not Rosh Hashanah at all. 2 walls with a beam or a pole doesn't count as anything. It's not a Rishos HaYachid. The only Rishos HaYachid is a Rishos HaYachid Gemura, is what we're discussing, where you got 4 walls. Okay, now the Gemara moves on to the next phrase in the Brisa, which was describing Rishos Harabim. And so we said Rishos Harabim is a place that has a lot of people walking through it, and we brought 3 examples. So the Gemara says, but again we say Zuhi Rishos Harabim. This is Rishos Harabim. What are we excluding? What would we have thought is a Rishos Harabim? The Gemara says, well, there's another Rav Yehuda case, and that's as follows. There's a special halacha that a well can be turned into a Rishos HaYachid by putting corners, just 4 posts in the corners, which each post consisting of 2 perpendicular boards an amma wide each. That's like 4 corners. This is a special kula that Chazal made, because otherwise people traveling wouldn't be able to draw water from the wells, because the wells of Rishos HaYachid goes down, and if they take the water out, they violate Shabbos. They wouldn't be able to drink on Shabbos. So therefore they made a special rule. You could just put these 4 corners and it becomes Rishos HaYachid. Now Rabbi Yehuda says that Rishos Harabim that passes between those sticks, with the way that people walk passes between the sticks, is not, that breaks up the Rishos HaYachid that the 4 corners create. So the Rabbanan argue, and the Rabbanan say, no, that doesn't break it up, that's not Rishos HaYachid. So that's what we're coming to exclude. Rabbi Yehuda's Rishos Harabim, which is where a walking path goes between those sticks around the well, that doesn't count as a Rishos Harabim. The Rabbanan disagree. So now the Gemara asks again what it says, the Gemara. It says this is a complete Rishos Harabim. What's that for? The Gemara says here it's not trying to do anything. Here it's just adding symmetry. The first part of the Brisa we said Gemara, so in the second part we say Gemara, but it's not really adding any halacha. And now the Gemara wants to know, in our list of examples of a Rishos Harabim, why do we leave out Midbar? The desert, we should have said that, because there's a different Brisa that lists the 3 things we said: a highway from city to city, the main town square, big streets that run from one end to the other, or from town square to town square, and the desert. So why do we leave that out? Abai says no. When it says the desert there, it means the desert where the Jews were in for 40 years when they came out of Egypt. There were 600,000 people there. That's Rishos Harabim. Our deserts are empty. That's not Rishos Harabim. That's a Carmelist. The Gemara now moves on to discuss the next phrase in the Mishnah, which described the repercussions for violating Hilchos Shabbos by carrying from any of these rishuyos, where one violates Shabbos Doiraisa. So the Brisa said that if one does it by accident, he has to bring a korban chatas. If he does it on purpose and there are witnesses, he gets skila, and if it's without witnesses, he gets kares. And the Gemara says these are classic standard halachas of violating any halacha of Shabbos midaraisa. Why do I need you to tell me this here in the Brisa, which is describing the form and the identification of the zones, rishuyos? So Gemara says the chiddush over here is that you get skila. I may have thought you don't get skila, and the main reason we're saying all these halachas is so that you know that you get skila for this, for carrying. The Gemara says, why is that chiddush? The Gemara says, because we have a statement of Isi Bar Yehuda, and it's a long story how we get to it, but the bottom line is that Isi Bar Yehuda says that out of the 39 malachos of Shabbos, there's one of them that's not skila. Only 38 of them are. So this is not one of them. Carrying is skila. That's the point of this brisa. Now, what's the story with Isi Bar Yehuda? What's this whole, how did he end up saying that? So the Gemara says the following thing. Rav was the secretary of Reb Chia, and Rav, we used to go through Reb Chia's papers, and Reb Chia had notes that people had written when they learned a new halacha before the times when it was permitted to write down Mishnayos and Gemara. It was also because it was Torah Shebal Peh, but if somebody heard a new halacha, he was allowed to write it down briefly so that he shouldn't forget it. So he found written there that Isi ben Yehuda said that the 39 malachos all count as one as far as a korban chatas. If somebody forgets it's Shabbos and he does all 39 malachos, he's only chayav one chatas, as long as he doesn't remember that it was Shabbos in between. Is one forgetting, no matter how many malachos, one korban chatas. So the Gemara says, but that's not true. That can't be what Isi ben Yehuda says, because we have a Mishnah that lists 39 malachas, and it tells you that there are 39. And the Gemara says, why does it say the number 39? To tell you that if you forget and you do them, each one is a separate chatas. So Isi ben Yehuda can't say the opposite of that. The Gemara says, what Isi ben Yehuda really meant was that for all of them you get skila, except this one you don't get skila, and that's what the Gemara is referring to over here. The Gemara now moves on to the next phrase in the Brisa, which was that a field counts as a Carmelist. The Gemara says that's not true. We have a Mishnah that says clearly, as far as Hilchos Shabbos, a field always counts as a Rishos HaYachid, not a Carmelist. As far as Tumah, which is, there are different halachos as far as Tumah is concerned between Rishos Harabim and a Rishos HaYachid, so then a field depends if it's the rainy season when things are growing there, nobody walks there, or if it's the summer when nothing's growing there, some people walk there. So then it's considered Rishos Harabim. But as far as Hilchos Shabbos, a field is always Rishos HaYachid, not enough people walk there. So why is the Mishnah saying it's a Carmelist? So Gemara says a few answers to this. The first one, which is the only one we'll do in this daf, is that it is a Carmelist. The Mishnah that says it's considered to be a Rosh Hashanah just means it's not a Rosh Hashanah. It doesn't mean that it's not a Carmelist either.